In today's episode, I'm going to show you a few Photoshop editing tricks that can elevate your photography artwork so that you can increase your sales and increase your revenue. I personally use Photoshop for most of my editing over Lightroom, as you have a lot more tools and options and control over your edits while still maintaining the integrity and quality of your images. One of the best ways a photographer can increase their profits and grow their business is by elevating their artwork and mastering their editing skills. A finalized piece of art is what sets amateurs apart from professionals. So today I'm going to show you one little quick trick, or a few little quick tricks that you should be using in your editing workflow. So to get started, I'm going to pull up some images in Photoshop. So some of these images are from my photography coaching clients, and a few are actually images that were submitted to our retouching masterclass, just to see what the perfect portrait workflow would look like on their artwork. So the number one thing that I think that a lot of photographers skip over, or at least I've seen a lot of photography artwork, and one of the things that I think that you guys can be doing to really elevate your artwork, and it is so simple, and that is to use the curves tool. So I know Photoshop can be a little bit overwhelming, but once you get in, you can learn the 20% that yields 80% of the results. It gets so much easier. And if you guys are interested in that, then you can definitely check out the retouching masterclass. I teamed up with my personal retoucher, Megan Hamilton, and she takes you step by step through my perfect portrait workflow and shows you the 20% to yield 80% of the results in Photoshop. It makes it super easy. There are videos that go through every single step, so she shows you exactly what to do, and you can watch them as many times as you need to. I'll post that link in the information below, so you guys have access to that if that's something that you're interested in. But for today, let's look at this awesome little tool called Curves. And when you're in Photoshop, it's this little one right here. It has a little like grid box with a line that goes up. So when we click on that, it gives us this like graph. And I am not an expert in Photoshop. I'm not an expert in any of this, but so if any of my terms are not technically correct, then please forgive me, but I do know that this makes a huge difference in your artwork. So if you pull up your curves and you pull over this little box right here, it increases your whites. If you guys can see that. So it brightens the image. So I'm gonna pull this kind of all the way over to about there. And then I'm gonna pull this up. Actually, I'm gonna pull this one over just a little bit to increase that contrast and those depths and those colors. And then I'm just gonna lighten it a little bit. By far, if you guys have seen my artwork, I definitely like a little bit more of a light and airy look. I feel like it is a lot more timeless, and let me just tell you guys, it definitely sells. I've been noticing that the photographers that have come to my boudoir workshop, posing workshop, and they're using those images on their websites are converting so much more than some of the other ones. So I know that the market really likes light and airy and timeless images. So anyway, so you guys can kind of see the difference in before and after. And if you're worried about losing some of this detail in the whites right here, like kind of where it blows out a little bit, you can just click on this right here. It's a mask. See, it says masks. And then you go over here to your paintbrush, make sure you're on this black foreground. I guess it's a foreground. And then I put it at 10%, and then you can kind of just paint back in some of those details. The reason why I didn't want to go any lower and I wanted to make sure it was brighter is because I wanted to brighten up her face a little bit more. And it's better just to go back in and add a little bit of these details than it is to try to dodge her face. So right up here is a history, so you can go back and kind of see like when we opened it. And then you can see after we did curves. And then you can see after we kind of painted some of those back in. I probably would go in and feather out those edges a little bit, but I was just trying to do it pretty quick for you guys. So you can kind of paint back in some of that detail in the white so it's not so blown out if you want to. But that just makes such a huge difference in the artwork. And I see a lot of photographers missing out on this, and they could definitely elevate their artwork immediately. So another example, let's do another example. So for this one, this is one actually from my boudoir workshop last year. So I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna play with those curves. You can see that typically where you wanna go is right here on this edge. The other one didn't have that, but typically this is where I go. I pull it all the way up to about right there, and then you wanna pull this one over to the bottom of that. So usually about right there. And for me personally, I want it a little bit lighter. I like it just a little bit more kind of airy looking. I don't know what else you would say that, brighter. So this is the difference just by playing with the curves. It just appears more crisp, more colorful, and more bright. The other thing I would personally do with this image is I would adjust the color. Just because I feel like that when pictures are vibrant and the skin tones are vibrant and have warmth, they feel more alive. And so personally, this is what I like personally. You may prefer cool tones, and if you do and that's your style, totally fine, but I'm going to show you the difference of what I personally would do. So I would bump up the yellows, and then I personally love to have some reds in there. So you guys can see where she looks at there, and then adding a little bit of warmth. It might be just a little bit too much. I also think it feels still a little green for my taste, so I might bump it down just a little. But you can see how she kind of looks pale, like kind of washed out, if you will, and then you add some warmth to her skin. It just makes her pop off the image. So you guys can see. Let's go all the way to the open. And I cropped it a little bit as well, but that's the open. Here we can see it from the crop. From the crop to there. So you guys can see the difference that it makes. Let's do another one. Here's one that was submitted to our retouching masterclass just to see what the perfect portrait workflow would look like. So you guys can kind of see this. It's almost like when you don't play with your curves and you don't have your curves adjusted correctly, then you kind of get this almost like grayed out filter across your entire image. So here we're going to just kind of pull it up, and then we're also going to pull this contrast. Her contrast is like super low, so you're not getting that powerful like pop of color and that contrast within and depth, if you will. So even the whites are good because it kind of brings up the shadows a little bit, but really the biggest difference is right here, and you guys will be able to see it here. Here's before and after. You see that kind of almost like gray haze that's over the entire image? This is where going in and finalizing your artwork and making sure that it stands out is going to make a huge difference in your business, in your profits, in your sales, in your revenue, everything. So make sure that you're doing this. And if you hate editing, find an editor to outsource to. That's going to make a huge difference. When we focus on our strengths and outsource the things that we are weak at, our business will grow so much faster. I cannot tell you that enough. And I know if you're trying to save money and you're trying to do it yourself, but you're procrastinating on it, either get a course or a class or take a workshop where you learn how to do the 20% that yields 80% of the results and learn how to do it faster, or find someone that you can outsource to. But you guys can kind of see the difference. Not kinda. You can actually see how big of a difference that just that one little tool makes, just playing with your curves. If you guys want to see the final image from the Perfect Portrait workflow, we added a few other stylized things to it, but here, I'll put this right beside each other. Here's like, well, actually that's not even the before, that's after curves. Where'd the other one go? So here's the before we played with the curves. And here's the after. So this is after the Perfect Portrait workflow, which is in our retouching masterclass. And we added a little bit of a sunburst as well, just some color there. So you guys can see what a huge difference that makes and how this image looks so much more professional and artistic. So this is what I'm talking about when editing and finalizing your images and making sure that you finalize your pieces of art. Make sure that they're in masterpieces. This is what people are going to pay for. They're not paying you to take an image that looks like you took it on your iPhone. They can do that themselves. They're paying you as the expert to give them something that they can't do themselves, to give them a professional art piece. So let's see, I have a few more examples to show you guys. Here, this is straight out of camera. Someone sent this for the retouching masterclass example. So this is a before, so we're just gonna play with that curves again and kind of pull those curves up. And yes, you lose a little bit of detail, but like I said, you can go back in on this mask, make sure your foreground is black, and use a brush and kind of paint it back in if you want some of that back in there. But we're gonna play with that a little bit, and then we're gonna kind of pull this over, and I'm gonna pull up just so we have a little bit. So there's light in her face and in her eyes. This one for sure is desaturated and the colors aren't popping. So I'm gonna show you what we did to that as well. But you can kind of see the difference here. Kind of grayed out. And then there's a lot more life in her face and in her eyes. So for the final image on this one, we obviously did some color and did a little bit of a vignette. Let me pull that. Initial image, and this is after the Perfect Portrait workflow and stylizing specifically for that image. So doing custom kind of color and edit that looked good on this one. You guys can see the difference in finalizing your artwork and making sure that you're editing. This is definitely what is going to set you guys apart from being an amateur photographer to a professional photographer. And when someone wants to spend money on a photographer, they're actually looking for someone who's an expert. They want someone who is going to give them something that they can't do themselves, or they can't have, you know, their cousin do, or their neighbor do, or their friend take a couple of quick pictures. So this is where you actually make money as a photographer, is in producing and giving art pieces that look professional and are something that they can't do themselves. I have one more example to share with you guys. It's a boudoir image. So once again, those curves make such a huge difference. You can see right there, takes that gray haze off, gives more light and like sharpness to the image, more depth. She just looks more alive in my opinion. And then after the Perfect Portrait workflow, put them side by side so you guys can see the before and the after. So this is the before and this is after the Perfect Portrait workflow. So hopefully you guys found this little trick helpful, and make sure that you're using that curves tool to really bring life into your images, and make sure that you're finalizing your artwork before you're giving it to your clients. This is going to make a huge difference in your business. It's going to make a huge difference in your sales and in your revenue. And if you want more help on figuring out the 20% in Photoshop, or you want a workflow that takes you step by step through how to retouch an image, especially for boudoir and portraits, definitely check out the retouching masterclass with my retoucher Megan. She takes you through it step by step, makes it super easy, and you don't have to figure it out all on your own. I'll link that in case you're interested. Thanks for hanging out. Make sure to subscribe and click the like button if you found this helpful. I will see you guys in the next video.